Nerfs have finally arrived. Massive nerfs just hit the War Within beta. 4 classes might be in real trouble. Oh my god. Could one of those 4 classes be yours? Let's see what these nerfs and who these nerfs are affecting.
Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dale, and we got a blue post for another beta build in the War Within. While no crazy adjustments and reworks and revamps are happening as of this newest build, there were a ton of new tuning changes, which lists off buffs after buffs after buffs, and I definitely want to dive into and sink my teeth into them as soon as possible. However, out of all this flurry of buffs, there have been a handful of nerfs that definitely stood out, and they only have affected a handful of specs: Beastmaster Hunters, Augmentation Evokers, Retribution Paladins, and one of the more popular picks, Elemental Shamans, are actually seeing some very
Damn, I don't know if you guys see this. Elemental Shaman's pumping compared to the rest of the group right now.
Sizable nerfs in the recent build. While we wait for the build to become available for testing, which will hopefully happen today, tomorrow, or sometime this week, I still wanted to take a look at all of these massive nerfs that are arriving and kind of just put all these classes in one single compilation. So this is going to be me covering basically the 4 classes that took the most amount of nerfs with this most recent build.
Let's see who got
As always,
nerfed.
if you guys want to see regular War Within class updates like these, be sure to follow the channel and subscribe. Otherwise, let's dive right in. So before we dive into these, I do still want to preface, this is a set of nerfs that hasn't arrived to the beta realms just yet. All we have is just a full list of things that are wanted to do with this next upcoming beta build, which is going to be dropping at some point this week. There may be other little adjustments or undocumented changes as part of this build, and even a good portion of these changes may not even appear in pushing builds.
Sorry, didn't notice you there. I'll turn that down a little bit. How's it going? Welcome back in. Listen, we got to interrupt this news to bring you a great message real quick from Samiccus. Many people know me as other names, Furicus, Baldicus, but I prefer Hunter people. And that's why I'm giving back to my community. That's right. You can have an epic edition for yourself. Get that early access, the pets, the mounts, and everything else. I'm not gonna lie. All you gotta do is watch 1 hour of my stream. 1 hour will give you a point to enter the giveaway. Every hour beyond that gives you more points. Subscribers get 5 extra entries. That's right, boys and girls. So get in here, be the degenerate.
Looks like
you
BM
truly
Hunters
are.
got nerfed. We have seen, also that's another thing to point out too, we have seen Beastmaster Hunters and plenty of other classes doing buku amounts of damage over on the pre-patch. However, beta build and pre-patch build are not the same build. So changes on the beta are not going to be appearing on pre-patch. So just be aware, and you probably won't see any of these beta changes really come into live realms until the release of this expansion, like a proper release in about 3 weeks. So all of these changes are just for the development realms, not for the pre-patch. But Beastmaster Hunter got nerfed a bunch. First of all, the pack leader, which is like their only really good and viable hero talent option, because trying out Ranger and it has you play around Call of the Wild, which isn't even a talent setup that a lot of people are even currently playing right now. But some Dark Ranger is just not going to play, but Pack Leader is, though they are going to be nerfing versus Hunt. That ability has been nerfed by 15% for Beast Mastery,
15%,
with a little bit of a different tuning for your Survival Hunters, but for BM, definitely not great news. They've also adjusted the Howl of the Pack ability, which allows you to put basic critical strikes to increase your crit strike damage by 5%, stack it up to 3 times. That 5% stack has been reduced to 3%, which is also unfortunate. However, the rest of the changes are going to be Beast Mastery specific. But we see things such as Laceration go from a 15% bleed damage to 5% bleed damage.
Wow, these are
Kill
like
command damage
pretty substantial nerfs here. I mean, there's across the board, like just dropping shit by almost a third.
Itself is also being reduced by 20%. Fenrir and Haughty effectiveness basically has been cut by 33%. Dire Beasts on their own, all Dire Beast damage has been reduced by 10%. But Fenrir and Haughty are technically counted as Dire Beasts, so I wonder if that double dips on them specifically. The actual pet damage itself, the basic abilities like their melee, their smack ability, their stomps, are all reduced by 10% as well. So that's both of your pets get a hit in the crossfire, as well as the barb shot damage reduced by 25%.
Were these guys, were like Beastmastery Hunters pumping or something? Why are these nerfs so substantial? Were they cranking out crazy numbers on the PTR? Dang.
Percent, which is a hefty amount of changes to hit Beast Mastery. Now, I have been trying to track this class a little bit more closely since I was going to do a specifically Hunter video, taking a look at Dark Ranger. So I got time to spend with some of the logs, at least when it comes to Mythic Plus. You don't really see a lot of Beast Mastery Hunters in the logs. Logs isn't everything, but a lot of people on the beta are logging all of their runs, so you can get a lot of data to work with, or at least a bit of data based on who is playing beta. That's a fraction of the players that are on live realms comparatively. But we don't really see a lot of Beast Mastery, like we see Survival Hunters or Mages, for example, but we do see them here and there, and they generally have been performing okay, not blowing every other class out of the water in every single scenario, but they generally have had decent damage, to say the least, but nothing that's been crazy, and in the past, a lot of players really perceived them as undertuned until they saw a couple of changes. So I'm kind of surprised that they kind of hit them as hard as they did, but I wonder if maybe somebody figured out some kind of a build for Beast Mastery that just absolutely busted, or maybe they're accounting for some of the other buffs that are coming out in the future, but they're nerfing the baseline of Beast Mastery in terms of their damage output. Like what?
I don't know what their tier set bonus is. Maybe there was some kind of interplay off of that was making them crank. But these are not like just little nerfs. These are pretty substantial.
The most amount of damage in your overall breakdown, for instance, and then they're probably gonna do some kind of like an aura adjustment. But that is gonna be the first class on our chopping block for the day. The other spec on this list, however, is going to be Augmentation, with Aug receiving a nerf towards the primary buff Party White mechanic, the main thing that really makes this class stand out. So when it comes to Augmentation's case, we're seeing a reduction to the Ebonite primary stat increases. So Ebonite baseline is going to increase 4 nearby allies' primary stat by 6.5% of your own. That is being down clocked to 5%. So you're essentially are removing roughly a 1.5% primary stat from every ally you would have buffed previously. On top of it, though, it's
a nerf, not huge.
Which makes the passive that evokers have currently, as of the current beta build, which allows them to increase the effectiveness of Ebonite and Breath of Eons by 10% when they're outside of a raid, because a good portion of the augmentation is set up for raid environments, big high target crowd environments, but they need to be a little bit more empowered when it comes to 5-man dungeons. This passive is essentially just getting removed. It's just going to be gone as this thing's go. At least from what we can see.
Damn, not even nerfed. They just deleted the ability. What the hell? Oh, well, there goes their viability in Mythic Plus.
Some blue boats, which is a significant loss. 10% to Breath of Eons and Breath of Might when it comes to party-wide combat. It is a bit of a downsizement, to say the least. Overall, I don't really think this is going to be enough, and this is just going by gut feeling. I think Augmentation is a very, very unique spec in the game. The support kind of playstyle that it offers, of course, it does a lot more damage now on the beta with the Scale Commander playstyle, but as well as a decent bit of damage with the Chrono Warden, and it is still primarily a DPS spec. It has a bit more of a support role. It has a bit more of this flexibility that we've just never really seen in World of Warcraft before, and that makes this spec stand out from healers as well as DPS classes as just a whole nother type of support class. On top of it, with tanks getting nerfed, abilities such as your Blistering Scales become even more important, because empowering the tank with additional armor based on your own armor becomes even better.
Yeah, man, that's going to be a pretty big one, considering the tanking nerfs and everything. That buff to the armor actually probably will be very useful, because we're going to be squishy as shit now.
Plus, I think what they were trying to do with this kind of changes is to try to figure out a decent spot for Augmentation. I think for the most part, trying not to make them mandatory for endgame content, because running dungeons on the beta without an AUG and with an AUG is quite noticeable for the healer, for the tank, and everybody else in the group. So it's actually quite a big difference. So them adjusting Augmentation to not be effective in dungeons, I wonder how that'll pan out. I think it will probably be good if Augmentation wasn't just a staple of every group, because we could see the rise of a god comp, and then you have a meta where you don't see a lot of class variety. And that's essentially what I really ideally would want to see out of Season 1 of War Within. I don't want to have the one god comp that just excludes every other spec and class out of the list. So it just makes it for an unfun season. So I wonder if they're able to manage Augmentation, whether you still would want to be bring in one where you will be happy with one, but not necessarily where everybody's required to have one as a mandatory pick going forward. But Augmentation nerfs are still going to come in effect, and it's going to be interesting to see how that'll affect testing once the beta realms get the new build.
Yeah, you know, the MDI runs and everything, you're going to see what these guys do. I will see how viable they are in Mythic Plus. That's really I mean, they're obviously you bring one in raid. You know, you got plenty of spots in raid, but where they were starting to shine a lot was, you know, those Mythic Plus runs. I actually didn't like that. Yeah, you know, that's what it is.
Another class spec that's getting a bit of a nerf is one of my favorites, and I'm actually so sad about this
Shaman?
one, is the Elemental Shaman.
Oh,
Elemental,
no.
I feel like quickly became one of my
Remember when the video first started, I said that Shaman was pumping, so, yeah.
favorite range casters. I mean, I've always enjoyed Elemental, but man, did they come out so winging after their first set of updates over in the beta, and the spec has been in such a good spot. It's actually been kind of
I've been
wild.
hearing so
But
many.
Elemental is receiving.
I've been hearing so many good things about Elemental Shaman. It was actually like a lot of people are very excited to play them for this expansion because Shaman's had a rough time. I felt like in Dragonflight overall. They got buffed, you know, towards the end here, but man, they were, you know, tough to play for a while. So, oh, cool, they fixed the helm dildo? Yeah, it actually hangs down now.
Some specific nerfs for basic abilities such as your Lava Burst and Elemental Lightning Bolt. Lightning Bolt nerfed by 3%, nothing crazy. Lava Burst nerfed by 20%, actually kind of crazy because fire builds were actually becoming a little bit more, I guess, not a little bit more,
nerf.
But basically the only popular pick, the only popular choice, or rather the most effective choice if you really wanted to pump some damage as Elemental. Elemental Blast also is getting reduced by 25%, a very popular pick. Earthquake nerfed by 15%, Flame Shock nerfed
These
by
are pretty
15%.
big nerfs.
So that's a lot of nerfs all across the board, and also gets less haste from Splintered Elements from 20% down to 10%. So that's going to put a dampener in Elemental. They are adding some buffs to hopefully help Elemental a little, I think mostly to promote build variety. Things such as your Thunderstrike Ward apparently getting amped by 150%. Earthshock damage is being improved by 25%, whereas Eleblast is getting nerfed by 25%, so maybe that'll be more even to each other. Power of the Maelstrom, which allows you to play around big chain lightning build and weaving lava bursts into chain lightnings more than anything. The chance of that has been increased from 25% chance to a 60% baseline chance. Liquid Magma Totem is getting a 30-second cooldown baseline, which is kind of awesome. Ice Fury damage has been improved by 85%.
Okay, let's all calm down for a second, because based on what he's saying here, it looks like they're trying to change the playstyle to add more variety in the way people are speccing, because they're not nerfing everything. It seems like there's some buffs on some sides. Now, is it sad for people who got excited about the way they were currently playing Shaman? Maybe. But this seems like they're trying to rebalance the spec more than nerf the spec.
Rage ability? Where is Earthen Rage?
Just
actually?
saying, put the pitchforks down
this thing. I was thinking to myself, like, oh, Earthen Rage. I feel like I heard them before. Yeah, this thing that used to exist way back in like Legion, WoD, somewhere in that time period. That's getting improved by 60%. That useless little thing. Not like it's a bad ability. It just hasn't really been compelling for a good while now. Oh, I guess one more nerf that I did miss. Additional Lava Burst from Primordial Wave deals 50% normal damage instead of 80%. So yeah, that's going to be quite an adjustment. I think what they're really trying to do is give Elemental Shamans a little bit more of a flexibility to play other builds, to play other play styles, to really be able to support some of these other talents down the road. But I mean, the lava build and the fire build ended up being a very, very popular pick and a very, very fun one. So this is going to be significant nerf to the overall damage.
That's where it's sad, is that if people are really having a lot of fun playing this lava build, I don't play Shaman, so I don't know exactly what he's talking about, but it's kind of sad that for the sake of variety, they're going to nerf something that people were actually found to be a very good build and a lot of fun to play. But
also a significant nerf, I think, to some of the fun factor of Elemental, because I felt like in the current state, you could pick them up, jump in a dungeon, do well, and perform. And this is going to definitely put a dampener into some of that output.
Like
hopefully there'll be other builds that work, because it looks like they're trying to make some of those lightning-based builds a little bit better, and they're just not as smooth as the fire builds. So I wonder if they'll end up reverting any of these going forward, just because the current version of Elemental is incredibly fun to play with. Now, another class spec that's seen some nerfs is actually Retribution Paladin. Just kind of feels like out of left field, but Paladins ended up taking a bit of a tumble, where other specs of Paladin, like Holy and Prod, has gotten buffs here and there. Paladin just gotten hit out of nowhere, it feels like. First of all, their tier set, the 4P.
Again, was Ret Paladin in this crazy place? I knew about Shaman, and I knew about Arcane Mage, which I'm guessing is going to end up being on this list, but was Retribution Paladin that buffed? Why are they nerfing us?
Wake of Ashes increases damage down by 10% for 8 seconds.
Ret was top. Oh, really?
8%. Nothing crazy, but we go on. The popular talent Blessed Champion with some of the different reworks that it did for like the auto attacky stuff. This talent where Crusader Strike and Judgment hit and then shall target, the damage cleave for this one has been reduced to 25% secondary target damage instead of 50% reduced damage. So that's gonna be a bit of a dampener in their overall cleave capability. Then we saw a bunch of different paladin abilities being nerfed a bunch. Like, for example, your Templar's Vital Verdict being reduced by 10%, Templar's Verdict reduced by 10%, Justicar's Vengeance reduced by 10%, Hammer of Wrath executability reduced by 15%, Blade of Justice damage reduced by flat 20%. Although the Blade of Vengeance damage has been increased by 25%, I guess to mostly compensate for the nerf to Blade of Justice.
Okay.
The damage component of Expurgation reduced by 10%. Templar Strike's ability and the Templar's Slash both reduced by 10%. Crusading Strike's damage reduced by 10%. And that is both Crusading Strikes and Crusader Strike variants, also both of them being reduced by 10%. The abilities such as Divine Storm have been buffed by 25%, I guess to compensate. And also, Word of Glory, you heal, increased by 20%, which I guess is nice for Herald of the Sun. We'll play with the Eternal Flame ability when it comes to personal survivability. But overall, though, that's just a bunch of 10%, 15%, and even 20% nerfs for Retribution Paladin specifically. Mostly,
they clearly didn't like how much damage was being put out by these guys. And also, there's some buffs, some slight buffs. So maybe they wanted to, again, kind of change the spec. Not as much as Elemental Shaman, but it looks like they're trying to push people to basically have more variety in their trees.
Single target with some compensation for AoE, but it does seem like it's still going to affect a good portion of their kit, and these kind of came out of nowhere. In the past, Paladins have had some bugs that allow them to deal more damage or less damage for one reason or another, but this blue post does not talk about any kind of functionality or any resolution of any kind of bugs that players were aware of, so this just seems like an overall nerf. But we have seen on the beta and on the blue post multiple times now where they'll say the buff an ability by a certain amount, but then they resolve certain bugs that cause that ability for some reason to do more damage than it did before, kind of like equalizing it, or in the form of Survival Hunter, for example, where they're doing some flank and strike changes where they're reducing the pet damage by quite a bit, but then they are finally enabling the pet to scale with other stats, so you actually are increasing the damage rather than decreasing it by a considerable amount. But nothing like this for Retribution Paladin, so it just seems like the spec just took a stray out of nowhere, and it just caught a bunch of nerfs out of left field. Though, as we mentioned before, all of these changes are still technically not on the beta yet. They are just a blue post.
Just wait, see if they happen.
To see more testing as this week goes on, with hopefully some kind of a beta build maybe in a couple of days or so. Because all of these changes definitely need to be tested. This build includes a bunch of these nerfs, but also a ton of different buffs as well, as they're trying to get the tuning down, I think, by the looks of it, as they're prepping all of our classes a little bit closer and closer to the release of this expansion, which is happening in just a handful of weeks, which is kind of exciting. But with that, I definitely want to hear what you guys think about all of these nerfs. What are your thoughts and the impact
so Arcane isn't on this list? I do think Arcane did take a nerf not too long ago, though. Anyways, this was probably prior to him making the list, a little bit before. But damn, look at this! Look at the he's still doing a lot, the Shaman. So I don't know if this is pre-nerf or post.
Beast Mastery on Retribution Paladins,
still doing some decent
damage,
damage,
well as Elemental Shamans. But also, how do you think augmentation is going to be affected? Do you think it's still looking like a mandatory pick going forward for every single series progression group, whether it's dungeons or raids?
Gotta take the fight
or do you
into
think
account
they're
too.
going to be maybe, hopefully, less mandatory and offer a bit more of that diversity and variety in terms of class compositions? Let me know those thoughts in the comments below. But with that being said, I do want to thank you guys so much for watching this video update, and I hope you guys enjoyed. And if you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give it a like. I would very much appreciate it. Join our Discord community. Links to that in the description of every single one of the videos. And let me know all your thoughts about everything we talked about so far. It's a lot of updates that are happening on the beta, and I'm so excited to actually test out this build as soon as it's made available. But otherwise, thank you all, and I'll see all of you guys in the next one.
Yeah, not bad. So, I mean, a lot of these changes seem to be like changes to playstyle more than nerfs across the board. That's what it looks like. Someone mentioned, yeah, it looks like they're taking away a bunch of the passive damage from Retribution Paladin, trying to create more, you know, of a sense of, well, you got to do your rotation properly to pump out damage. And then Shaman, it looked like it was, they wanted more variety in the spec. Looked like everyone was speccing into that fire tree spec and the same exact way, and they wanted to change it up a little bit. That could be it. Now, again, these aren't live yet on the PTR even, so though they might change going forward. We'll have to see.